Hello folks. In this video I'm going to show you a modification that you can do to the lens mount on the Blackmagic Pocket 4K to make the lenses fit just a little bit more snug. Now, quick disclaimer, do this at your own risk. I will be partially disassembling the camera and I will be bending some little metal tabs in there, so keep in mind this is something that you're going to have to make the decision whether or not to do, and you're going to be taking the risk yourself. So if it's under warranty or if you're not comfortable doing this, then just bear that in mind. The mount on my Pocket 4K is not terrible, and it's actually the worst with this lens, so I'm going to show the play with this lens so that we can more easily see any difference kind of before and after. What's common with a lot of lenses is that you'll get some, take this off there. What's common with a lot of lenses is you'll get a little bit of rotation back and forth. And that is just due to a little bit of play in the pin, the locking pin that holds the mount from, or the lens from being able to be removed. And that's fairly normal, although it shouldn't be able to rotate quite as easily as this one does, which moves very easily. But the larger problem, and I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little better, is that there is actual, kind of movement up and down play in the mount. Now, the modification I'm going to show today can help reduce that, but also bear in mind it is not a complete removal of that. It's not a complete fix, and even if it does make an improvement, it's still going to allow some play with heavier lenses. So it's just still something you may have to deal with, but it should at least make it a little bit better, particularly with very light lenses like this that really shouldn't have that much play. So let's get started and I'll show you how to do this. Again, this really isn't something you should attempt unless you're pretty comfortable with doing this kind of thing, and it should always be done at your own risk. Pretty much the only thing you'll need to remove the lens mount ring is a 2mm hex driver. It's just a simple Allen wrench. There is a tiny bit of spring tension behind this little release button, so bear that in mind and maybe remove it very slowly. So this is just the ring, and behind that ring you have this little shim. Behind that mount you have this shim, and there are these little tabs that actually spring load the lens to kind of preload it to keep it tight. So all we're going to do is tweak those just a little bit to give us a little bit more spring tension. And now what I'm showing here is this little tab, and simply bending it up like this isn't going to do very much at all, because it's actually the bow that is in this tab that gives it the tension. So when the lens goes to push this down, this little piece of it right here will bottom out, and it's actually like the little U-shaped bend in that gives it the tension, not how far it sticks up per se. So you're going to want to hold it on both sides and just put a little bit of a sharper U into it. So now I've done the first one, and you should be able to see there's a very slightly steeper bend. You have a little bit of a steeper U angle on that one than, for instance, this one, which you can see is nearly flat in comparison. And the way I did it, the way I found that's probably the easiest to do it, because you don't really want to bend up the outer part of this, but take something round that's a smaller radius than what you're trying to put into the part. This marker is a pretty easy way to do it, and just line it up so that only the little tab is resting against the marker, and then take your fingers and again just try to push down only on the little tab on only the tab you're trying to bend, not the outside. And just rest it against the marker. And then just pry down on it to kind of shape it around the marker a little bit. And if you bend up the outside, you can tweak that back, but just try not to mangle it up too much because you don't want to warp that or crack it or anything. But now you can see once again, and again, I did kind of bend up the outside a little bit, so you got to be careful of that. But once again, you can see that that one now has a slightly steeper U shape to it versus the one I haven't done yet, which again, you can see very nearly flat. So I'll just take this last one. Yep. Bend that one a little bit too. Again, kind of bent the outer portion, but you can kind of straighten that back out a little bit. And then once you're done, you will see much steeper U shape to that. And now once we put this back in, that should give us quite a bit more preload on the lenses. And for putting it back together, it's fairly simple. You do have to be a little bit careful. If you saw this little plastic piece popped out of there, but that just goes right back in here around the button. Nothing too complicated there. And then this just slips back in place. And there are two little pins that has to go around. So you can see there's two little locating pins. You just have to make sure that that spacer goes around those. Then position the mount ring back in place and put the screws back in. Now, what I would like to do, I mean, I say usually, it's the first time I've done this, but what I would usually do in a situation like this is get one screw started and in far enough that it's going to hold the ring mostly in place. Then I'm actually going to stand it up to do the rest of the screws so that I'm less likely to accidentally drop one on the sensor. So that way, if I'm trying to start the screws like this and I drop one, most likely it's going to go on the table. Now, these are very coarse threaded screws, so you do not want to cross thread them. So what you can do is to go get it started, if you just screw backwards a little bit, you'll feel it drop into place, and then you should be able to get it started, and you should feel it go easily into the threads that are there. Now, I'm not going to tighten any of them down all the way until I get all of them started. Again, you turn backwards slowly, and there you'll feel it click down into the threads. Then you can put it in very easily. That one I actually felt get started with my fingers, so I don't have to go backwards because I felt it drop into the threads very nice. And then I'm just going to go around and just little by little snug these into place. And these don't have to be super tight. You know, they're just coarse thread and they're going into the carbon composite of the body. So you don't have to crank these down. You'll feel them seat and then just snug them up a little bit once they seat and you're fine. You don't have to crank them super tight. They were not super tight to begin with. So that's it. It's back together. The release button is working properly. Now I'm going to go ahead and attach the lens, and we should see that it is quite a bit tighter on there. And yep, it takes a lot more force to get it to turn. And well, yeah, see, I can't even make it turn back and forth with the lens hood, which I could before. Before, the lens hood could make it turn back and forth. Now the lens hood comes off. And I'll zoom back down just a little bit again. And we'll see that with the same amount of force I was applying before, I'm not able to get that to move. So Very easy fix. There's just that little spring spacer in there that preloads the lens. If you just take the 4 screws out of this, you can pull that preload spacer out. You can put a little bit more preload into those springs, and you've tightened your lens right up. So that's it. Very easy fix. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them up down below, and I'll answer if I can. As always, thank you for watching. Take care.